But an Islamic fundamentalist?
3 nights before the attack, Mohamed Atta and Marwan al-Shehi drank at this Fort Lauderdale bar. It gained immediate notoriety. Federal agents flashed pictures of the terrorist pilots who just a day earlier had demolished the World Trade Center to the manager, Tony Amos, and Patricia Adrisi, the bartender. We were able to recognize both gentlemen, Amos said. Atta drank Stoli vodka for 3 straight hours, the bartender remembered. Marwan al-Shehi was drinking rum. They were very rude, she said. They didn't want to pay the bill. When asked if they could afford the $48 bar tab, Atta pulled out a thick roll. Mohamed said he worked for American Airlines and he could pay the bill, she told reporters. The guy Mohamed was drunk, Amos said. A week later, Amos changed his story. Mohamed Atta drank nothing stronger than cranberry juice that evening at Chuckham's bar, night manager Tony Amos now said. He was sitting quietly by himself. Take a look at this picture. Do you think the restaurant manager changed his story because he mistook Atta for someone else? We wanted to ask him, but when we stopped by, neither he nor bartender Adrisi were there any longer. The current bartender, before she realized she said too much, indicated their leaving was somehow 9/11 related. Life in Venice must have been hell for someone with Atta's jet-set taste. Atta must have chafed. No wonder everyone ragged him his bad attitude. But was Venice his choice? Why did Mohamed Atta and so many other 9/11 principals come here? His 3 trips to Venice in the last 6 weeks of his life must have been business. Who was he meeting? Local law enforcement indicated to us that they too would like to know that answer.
And that's when our search led us to begin looking into this man, flight school owner Rudy Deckers, responsible 2 years ago for an influx of literally hundreds of Arab pilot trainees. This then is the central dramatic question to our story, to the tragedy of September 11th. Did Arab men just wander up and down the Gulf Coast of Florida as easily as if they'd been listening to Tom Petty albums all their lives? Or were they assisted by a global network? If they were, Rudy Deckers would be the place to look. In the aftermath of the tragedy, Deckers was everywhere on television, portraying himself as just an innocent businessman, victimized by the perpetrators of one of history's greatest crimes. Is he? The first thing we heard about Rudy Deckers came from a female researcher who called to tell us he sounded phony to her in his television appearances, that there was something odd about him. Was it female intuition? He sounded sincere enough to us.
This morning at 7 o'clock I heard what happened, and the first thing I questioned myself was if I would have known. I would kill him by my own bare hands. If I have a Muslim coming in right now, I think that I'm going to be a human being and tell him, get the hell out of my property here. The day that all this occurred, we felt very, very sad, like all the other Americans.
Deckers isn't American, he's Dutch. In his response, to pass the buck on to unnamed underlings sounds a little rehearsed.
How was it that you first came in contact with these men?
I have heard yesterday from my own police, because I don't have contact with every student that walks in, that these 2 individuals came in July in 2000, checked our facility, said that they were flying in another facility in Tampa. They were not happy at that facility. They came back after a couple of days and decided that they wanted to fly with us.
That seems a simple, straightforward chronology. But compare it with the words of the chief flight instructor at Jones Aviation in nearby Sarasota, Florida, who tells another story altogether.
It was on or about June of, would have been 2000. They came up from Huffman Aviation. It's not our policy normally to enroll students from other schools. It has to pretty much be an exception. And in their case, I did make an exception for the reasons they gave me.
Deckers said terrorist ringleader Atta was already an experienced pilot when he arrived at Huffman Aviation.
So were they learning to fly from square one, essentially?
No, Mr. Atta had a private pilot license already, and I see he, if I pronounce right, he had only a few hours. They did a private pilot license with us, single-engine commercial and multi-engine commercial.
But we soon heard this statement totally contradicted. More anomalous evidence.
Atta was already a pilot. He already had a private pilot's license. Isn't that right?
Not when he came here. No. He was close to getting a private license. He had 3/4 of the course complete.
The same course that Marwan was taking.
Yeah.
But but there was no discernible difference in training skills and skills events between the two?
Between the two, Atta was the better pilot of the two, but both of them, I mean, looking at them both as two students learning together, where they were in the curriculum when they came here, they should have been a lot further along.
The FBI, we learned, had known about terrorists training at Rudy Decker's flight school for some time, which probably accounts for their swift response.
The FBI visited you just a few hours ago and confiscated some records. Can you tell us about that?
It was yesterday, 2:30 a.m. They called my managers here in Venice and wanted to see 2 files. I came in at 7 o'clock in the morning. They were still there. I talked briefly with them. They were ready to go. I told them that we have more customers, clients from the Middle East, and I thought it was a good idea to give them all my files. So I gave them a couple of 100 files from the last years.
The contents of the files of Rudy Decker's flight school might answer some persistent questions about the terrorist conspiracy's operations in Florida, and even reveal what kind of help they may have received in this country and from whom. But these questions haven't been answered because the FBI hasn't talked about what's in them. One Venice law enforcement official told us they, the FBI, loaded 2 Ryder trucks right outside the police station, then drove the trucks right onto a C-130 military cargo plane at Sarasota Airport, which flew out with Jeb Bush aboard. Since the FBI is not talking, maybe somebody should ask Jeb Bush. Then the cat got out of the bag just a little bit, as it sometimes does in the immediate aftermath of a major event.
Let me ask you this. One of these men is widely considered to be responsible for a bus bombing in Israel. How was it that they could gain admittance to your school?
Well, they didn't came through our paperwork like they're calling from Europe, and we know 2 months ahead that they're showing up. As I said, they came from another flight school out of Florida. Probably that flight school did all the INS paperwork with them in their country.
Authorities immediately denied that the Mohamed Atta who masterminded the demolition of the World Trade Center was the same Mohamed Atta who had 15 years earlier blown up an Israeli bus. So there apparently were 2 separate Arab terrorists with the exact same name. But then we discovered a story from September 15th's Washington Post stating that Mohamed Atta had been to International Officers School at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama, and that others of the terrorists had attended the Aerospace Medical School at Brooks Air Force Base in Texas and the Defense Language Institute in Monterey. 3 of the terrorists had even listed their address on their driver's licenses as the Naval Air Station in Pensacola, Florida, the story went on, where they participated in military exchange programs for foreign officers at the Pensacola Naval Air Station. If foreign nationals who became terrorist pilots were training at U.S. military facilities, they would most likely have had connections to Arab governments considered friendly to the United States, and that's a big story. But when the Post story ran, authorities denied it too, so now apparently there are 3 separate Mohamed Attas. Imagine that. Rudy Deckers was quick to disclaim any responsibility. He was just an innocent businessman, he told reporters.
And I know it's difficult because you, in some sense, feel a little bit of responsibility, don't you?
No, we don't feel responsible for what happened at all, not nothing.
The terrorists were only in Venice for a short time before moving on to Florida's East Coast, Decker said.
I have learned yesterday that after November 2000 that they left this facility and went to a flight school in Pompano Beach where they had additional training for jets.
In later interviews, his story remained much the same.
Atta and Al-Shihi walked into the front door, and we have no obligation whatsoever to do any background checks or passports or ID.
So who was to blame for the terrorist presence in our midst? Exactly 6 months later, Rudy Deckers, oddly enough, helped provide the answer.
Exactly 6 months after the September 11th terrorist attacks, the man who trained 2 of the terrorists to fly got some unexpected paperwork in the mail.
Yesterday, Rudy Decker of Huffman Aviation in Venice received the visa application approvals for hijackers Mohamed Atta and Marwan Al-Shehi.
Because of some strangely suspicious timing, Rudy got to use the V word right on television. Vindicated.
I don't expect on a Monday morning when I come in and I open my mail to get 2 permits from Atta and Al-Shihi. I thought they were already past me. We applied for the right paperwork, and therefore I'm happy I can do that now.
So you feel vindicated?
Yes.
And suddenly the finger of blame was beginning to point
towards the lowly INS.
Decker says he was not surprised to receive the paperwork on Atta and al-Shahhi 7 months after he sent it in. He said that's actually a short time. He says the process can sometimes take up to 2 years. The INS, meanwhile, is embarrassed by this whole situation, and in a release statement says that, quote, the current system for collection and tracking information on students is outdated, inaccurate, and obsolete.
Thank God for hard-hitting American journalism. Decker's got major public relations mileage out of the INS snafu. We suppose only a cynic would wonder if someone had planned it this way.
The flight schools didn't do anything wrong. The government needs to look at itself and look at procedures, what they can change, so this would not happen anymore.
But when the Dutch national whose flight school was the terrorist American beachhead was invited to testify before Congress about his views on preventing a recurrence of September 11th, it struck some observers as being a little much. Rudy and CNN seemed to have quite a meeting of the minds. Rudy was now even advising Congress, just as he had earlier offered help and advice to the FBI.